You all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. Palms down. So good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good to see you all. Thanks for being here. None of you would ever know that there were 30 college kids here at 8 a.m. this morning. We always, at least I always joke about there being miracles. And one of them is the fact that you can get 30 San Diego State college kids here to be silent for 4 hours at 8 o'clock in the morning. So if you ever think there's things that are impossible, recognize that in itself should show you just about anything can happen. And most of them even stayed awake the entire time. We do a day of silence we have for about 12, 13 years. We've put it on hold with the pandemic since we closed, and opening back up, we haven't started it yet. But we've done 2 now with the college kids. And they show up at 7:55 and they're seated at 8, and they're stuck and locked in meditation and silent for the next 3 hours. And then they go on a walking meditation, and then they go to the park. And so that's 4 hours without looking at their phone. I mean, how many of us in the room have gone 4 hours without looking at our phones? Imagine being 19 and doing that. That's like torture. Mark, right? This stuff is not easy. So I always think that if this practice had been introduced at a younger age, what an impact it would have had. Often people think that those who show up here are young, and I always say, no, the average age here is pretty much 40, 50 and up from there. I think when you're 20, you still feel like you know what you're doing. And then you snap your fingers and you're 50 and you're like, wait, what? I don't know what I'm doing. So the sooner we can all wake up to, and if you're brand new to Buddhism, the sooner we all can wake up to, as the Buddha called it, the 3 poisons, the greed, the anger, and the ignorance, the sooner we wake up to these practices in our lives, the easier our life becomes. And I call them practices because they really are. You know, we talk about Buddhism being working on generosity and compassion and wisdom, and that is a practice. But the opposite of those, which is the greed, anger, ignorance, is also a practice. We have to practice being angry, or we have practiced being angry. Have you ever been angry? How long have you been angry?
Recently?
Recently? Like, I mean, I just saw you an hour ago, so within the last hour?
Much less. No.
Much less. And for what period of time? How long? Anything you've been holding on to for like 30 years? I'm just guessing you're over 30.
I have been, over the last 9 years, I've been practicing letting go.
For 9 years, the same thing.
Same thing.
Doesn't that suck?
It's the practice.
That's actually 9 years is not that bad.
I'm actually grateful that I'm able to practice.
Yes. Because the alternative would be what? To practice letting go, what's the alternative of that?
It's hell.
It's hell.
It's hell on earth.
Hell on earth.
And I've been there for many, many, many years prior.
Yeah. So if you didn't hear it in the back, it's hell on earth, and you've been there for many, many years prior. So for 9 years, you've been practicing moving through something, and it really is. It's a daily practice. Anyone been holding on to anger for more than 9 years? Your hand went up quick. How long?
I declined to stay.
You decline what?
I said I declined to stay.
Oh, after the excitement to raise your hand. Now you're going to bow out? All right,
Okay,
30 years. And that's being conservative, so it could be like 40, but you just don't want to sound that bad? Okay, yeah, I don't need specifics. I don't. So 30 years, angry. How is that?
It sucks.
It sucks. You two should get together afterwards and chat. 9:30, don't make it 30, right? It's rough. So, and for me, like here we are I'm laughing at the fact that you've been miserable for 30 years, right? And you only 9, congratulations. See what it could have been. But I find this approach to practice to be very beneficial, because if we don't try to find humor in these things that just destroy us, it gets rough. It gets really rough. And if we can utilize these, I think, awarenesses of finding humor, then I believe it helps keep working through it. Because if we sat down and actually gave like a lot of attention to how miserable we've been about something for so long, and we focused on it from a negative view, it gets even worse. Right? So I always try to bring laughter and humor into this practice. The seriousness, especially with Zen. Zen practice is very serious, but there's also, I think, humor in all of that, which is very beneficial. So the more we can learn to lighten up a little bit around the craziness in our lives, and the gentler we can approach things, the easier the path and the practice really becomes. So on those happy notes, we'll go ahead and we'll start the meditation practice. I won't ask for any more volunteers. A couple things to tell you before we begin, for those who might be new. Nothing's going to happen to you. You will not float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or doing it wrong? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. We'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And the practice of meditation is learning to get quiet and still within all the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. It helps if you're on a cushion, slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important, do not expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgment from the practice. Just sitting. Breathing. Keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, it's not from anything I said. It's not from how we sit and hold the hands across the legs. It's not from sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than any one of us who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen and you react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. The practice of meditation is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your days. And so all we're working on is closing the gap where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. Meditation is not an escape, as often people think it is. Meditation doesn't fix your life. If your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, meditation won't change it. It will make you become aware of why your life is the way it is. And then you must actively make changes in your life for your life to change. And that's why we call it a practice. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not a quick fix. It takes time. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice free. Sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else you encounter all day long. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything around us, and we work on changing our mind and our reaction to the world around us, life gets simpler. But it's not easy. So I talked a little bit, I touched on briefly, and I'm not ever really sure how I end up on certain subjects or topics, but the idea of holding on to things for so long, which all of us in this room are fortunate enough to have the experience of, I'm sure. If you're here Saturday morning at 11 o'clock for meditation, chances are there's something in your life that hasn't gone exactly how you wanted it to. Actually, if you're alive and breathing, chances are something in your life hasn't gone exactly how you wanted it to. And so this practice is learning to be with that and trying to get through each day, having a little more kindness and compassion for yourself and those around you. And especially for those that have caused harm. That's where our heart and mind tends to open. And often we think that moving beyond things that we've been carrying for a long time has to do with the other person. It doesn't. It has to do with us. And for me, the Buddhist teachings around non-self, which is such a core practice and incredibly difficult to do. But it's to recognize, not that we don't exist, not that we're not here, but that we all exist. We're all here, us and every other person that has caused harm. We too have caused harm in other people's lives. And it's not like a scale. It's not like, well, they caused more harm than I did. It's not a game. It's not a scale. It's the recognition that we are human. We have done things that caused harm. And other people are human, and they have done things that have caused harm. So the practice of non-self is to understand that we are no different, no better than anyone else. That we are not more important than anyone else. We're also not less important than anyone else. But that our lives are not controlled, nor dictated, nor owned by the past experiences of others, which is very often what happens when we hold on to things for a long time. We allow those people or those situations or those experiences to still control us and own us. So in many ways, we become the victim over and over and over again from something that occurred potentially a long time ago. I've worked with trauma victims for 25 years of all levels, from sexual abuse to wounded warriors coming back, dealing with trauma, PTSD, traumatic brain injuries, individuals in prison who've been beaten and abused since childhood, people not in prison who've been beaten and abused since childhood. I've seen a lot. And for me, the Buddhist teachings around non-self is what helps us move through the anger and hatred that we still carry in our hearts towards others. That those individuals have also experienced pain and suffering, just like we have. And we just happen to cross paths. Lucky for us, right? And that was the experience. And when we make it about them, it stops us from opening our heart. So moving into a place of forgiveness and compassion and understanding requires us opening our heart to recognize that everybody's going through a mess that we don't understand. So, lots of fancy Buddhist phrases you can put around this stuff: non-self, compassion, wisdom, all these Buddhist things. But to me, what it really boils down to is just opening your heart and trying to get through each day. So with that, I'll pause. I always really prefer just to respond to questions. Meditation, Buddhist practice, anything that's on your mind. And I'll use the rest of the time this morning to address your thoughts or questions. Yes.
I have a question. Last week, I can't remember, you were talking about something and a word came out and made me think. The word was either soul or reincarnation. But I was wondering if you could talk about the Buddhist, I don't know what the philosophy is.
Yeah. You want me to just sum up rebirth for you?
Sure.
Let me break it all down for you. So let me and I would have said rebirth. I often would also say reincarnation. To give it a little bit of context, just for anyone who might be brand new to Buddhism, with this idea of rebirth, right? Always a fun, light subject for a Saturday morning, in case y'all wanted to know where you come from or where you're going. The first thing is to understand that when the Buddha was alive, 2,500 years ago, 500 years before Christ in India, everybody, for the most part, believed in rebirth or reincarnation or a continuation of consciousness, something along whatever you call it. They believed in a continuation. So when the Buddha was teaching, it wasn't like he had to convince people, hey, you're going to be reborn. He didn't have to like explain it to people. It's just what everybody thought, right? Now, if you went up to somebody 2,500 years ago and said, you got one life and then you're going to heaven or hell, they would have thought you were kind of nuts. You walk up to the average person today and you tell people you're going to be reborn, they think you're nuts, right? This is the culture and context that we are living in today. For the most part, not all, right? But chances are, if you grew up in a, Western religious context, wherever you may have grown up at is irrelevant. But if you grew up in a Western religious context, we grow up around heaven or hell, and this is your life, and better make the best of it because you only live once, and when you die, hopefully you don't go to hell, right? I mean, that was kind of. And if you're Jewish, it was great because once a year you got to just, ask for forgiveness and everything was fine. So Buddhist teachings are very different, but it's important to understand that the Buddha didn't make this up. It's not like he sat down one day and said, I'm going to invent rebirth or I'm going to invent reincarnation. The Western mind often does that and says, well, that Buddha, he taught rebirth. What did he know about it, right? Nothing. Right? That's what everybody believed. So I always want to start there, okay? The next thing is to understand that in different Buddhist cultures, we'll use different words, right? Rebirth, reincarnation, alaya vijnana is a storehouse consciousness, a continuation of karma, okay? So at that time, with everybody believing in rebirth, their goal of practicing what the Buddha taught wasn't so they could get through their day and be happy and stress-free. It was so they could have a good rebirth. How many of you showed up here this morning, right? Were you two roaming around before I saw you and said, I really want to go to the Dharma Bum temple because I want to make sure I have a good rebirth? Probably not. How many of you showed up here today thinking, I want to make sure I have a good rebirth, and that's why I'm going to go meditate, right? There's always like 1.5. Reality is we're here because we want to deal with our stress and our anxiety and our anger. And we want our lives to be smooth, and we want to get everything we want. We want to be okay with it. We just want the world to do what we want. We don't want to worry about rebirth. Imagine for a minute if rebirth actually was true. Wouldn't you work a little bit harder at how you treated people? Somebody once said that if you want to understand your past life karma, look at your present life. If you want to understand your future life karma, look at your present life. To me, the most important thing about the teaching on rebirth, and I'll get into a few things in a minute, reincarnation, continuation of consciousness, whatever you want to call it, whether you believe in it or not is completely irrelevant. It doesn't matter. 95% of the people I've been around for years in a Buddhist world don't believe in rebirth or reincarnation and don't spend any time thinking about it. And that's perfectly great. But would you like to have a pleasant afternoon? Who here wants to have a nice afternoon? Anyone here want to have a miserable afternoon? If you want to guarantee a miserable afternoon, you know what you need to do? Have a miserable morning and continue that. That miserable morning will then become a miserable afternoon. And if you want to just stick in your miserable afternoon for 5, 6, 7 hours, you know what that miserable afternoon is going to become? A miserable evening. Now, if you'd like to have a pleasant afternoon, have a pleasant morning. If you want to have a pleasant evening, have a pleasant afternoon. Our entire life will continue this cycle. When we die, I don't think about that. For me as a practitioner, I focus on not what happens when I die or where I go when I die, or am I going to be reborn as an animal? Am I going to be reborn into a hell realm? Buddhist teachings does have hell realms and heaven realms and God realms and all kinds of cool realms if you want to study all that. But again, most people aren't here for that, right? But I focus on what am I doing today? Because that focus on what you're doing today, day in and day out, will determine. I mean, even if you believe in going to heaven or hell, what determines that for the most part? Who wants to play along? What determines where we go when we die?
It's like behavior and, I don't know, how you treat other people.
Your behavior and how you treat other people. Buddhist practice, same thing, right? So did the Buddha teach rebirth, reincarnation, continuation of consciousness? Absolutely. But that's because what everybody believed. The Buddha was Hindu. Grew up Hindu, beliefs in gods and goddesses. There were 14 questions the Buddha wouldn't answer. One of them was about gods and goddesses, which is where heaven and hell has really come from anyways, right? That whole idea. And the Buddha said, when they asked him about gods and goddesses, and they're not talking about the God today, they didn't ask the Buddha, what do you think about Jesus? Because Jesus wasn't born until 500 years later. They asked the Buddha, should we believe in gods and goddesses? Right? Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu, Lakshmi, Saraswati, Parvati, all these Hindu gods and goddesses, everybody believed in them. And the Buddha said, look, if you want to believe in them, you do. If you don't, you don't. That's up to you. I'm not here to teach you about gods and goddesses. You're on your own there. I'm here to teach you how to do what? Be nice to people. A wonderful metaphor I learned years ago for rebirth is, and for me as a practitioner, like 98% of everything I've ever read on Buddhist teachings makes absolute logical, practical sense. As I said earlier, growing up Jewish in San Diego, this idea of rebirth seems odd and strange to me. But if 98% of what he taught makes perfect logical sense and I've practiced it and I actually agree with it, then I take the other 2% and I'm like, yeah, maybe it's just my own being stuck in a Western raised mind. So I'm like, I'm all in. Do I know anything about what it's like? No. Do I focus on where I'm going to go when I die? No. But a great metaphor I was taught was, imagine you have a cup, right? You hold the cup. It's a teacup. It's a cup with tea in it. Makes it a teacup. You shatter it. The cup breaks. You have tea on your hand. You have tea on your leg. You have tea on the ground. You take a rag. You take the rag. You wipe it. You rinse it. Or you squeeze it. And tea comes out of it. The tea has never changed. It was in the cup. It was on your hand. It was in your leg. It was on the ground. It was in the rag. And now it's back on the ground. But what shattered? The cup. The Buddha taught, we are the cup. We are this physical form. We are the shell that has come together for a period of time and will cease to exist. But our consciousness, alaya vijnana, I referenced it earlier, storehouse consciousness, that is your accumulation of karma. That is all of your actions. Everything you've ever thought, everything you've ever said, everything you've ever done creates your consciousness. That consciousness is the tea. And it's going to continue. So, don't leave somebody else bad tea, because that physical body is going to have to deal with the mess you've created. Does that help?
Can you talk about karma also and describe that?
Yes. Before I jump to karma, last thing I want to say about the rebirth, the reincarnation piece, when I say, does it make sense? Never when I share that do I ever expect anybody to be like, oh yeah, great, I get it. Go rebirth, right? That's not the point. I don't share it. I don't talk about it unless it gets asked, because like I said, I think it's completely irrelevant. It's something that a lot of people ponder, because the one thing we cannot escape is death. So we're all going to get there. So to me, the most important teachings about death and rebirth is life. How do you live your life? That's most important. Any questions on that before I move on to anything else? In case I haven't perfectly cleared up rebirth for you all. All right, karma. The word karma means action. Karma is not what goes around comes around. Karma is not getting what you deserve. Karma is not, well, karma is going to get them. Right? Anyone ever said that? Like, karma is going to get them, or they did something bad and something bad to happen to them, and then they said that's their karma. Karma doesn't get you. Karma is not what you get. Karma is what you give. The word karma literally means action. So as when I say your entire life is an accumulation of your karma, what it means is it's an accumulation of your actions. And the Buddha taught that we generate karma 3 ways: body, speech, and mind. Everything we think, everything we say, and everything we do is how we generate karma. So that's why the teachings around Buddhist practice are always to be mindful and kind and compassionate with what we think and what we say and what we do. Because this is what we bring into the world. So think of a cue ball when you play pool. You hit the cue ball, it goes into the rack. Every time the cue ball hits the rack, the ball is going to a different direction. Our entire life, we are that cue ball. And every person, every place, everything we encounter, we leave an imprint. All right? So if somebody comes up here and like punches me right now, right? Hopefully they won't, because we're in a Buddhist temple. I don't think I've, made anyone too angry yet. But somebody punches me right now. I got a lot of choices. Right? I could do nothing. I could punch them back. They storm off. They get into a car crash. Who's equally tied to that scenario? Me. So that individual's accident way later on, karma's not about fault. This is so difficult for Western culture to wrap their head around, because we grow up thinking that karma is about what you get and what you deserve. It's the most misunderstood teaching in Buddhism in the Western culture. We think karma is what we deserve or what we get. We think karma is about blame or fault. It's none of those things. It's simply the actions you bring into your day. So, does that help? Yeah. Other questions?
So I'm brand new to.
Nice.
everything.
Rebirth is always a great place to start. If we haven't freaked you out enough already.
Yeah, no. I've like dabbled into it here and there. I'm raised Catholic.
Yeah.
Until about 10 years ago, that's like all I know. But I've been kind of like looking into Buddhism, but I'm kind of lost on where to start.
Yes.
Because, Catholicism, we finally go to church on Sunday, boom, that's it. And I feel like it's not clear, so
Yes.
guide me.
Yeah, the only guidance, so let me sum up for our millions of YouTube followers. You're brand new to this. You were raised Catholic, and up until 10 years ago, that was like everything you knew. And now you've dabbled into looking into Buddhism, and you're very lost because you're not sure where to go or how to start. Yeah, perfect. Stay lost for a very long time, right? The best thing about Buddhist practice is it's not about one thing or one way, right? As I alluded to already, being raised Jewish, always, show of hands here, how many of you are Buddhist? How many hands do you see up? None, maybe one, right? The people that come here, let me start here for a newbie, right? They're not Buddhist, they're Christian, they're Catholic, they're Muslim, they're Jewish, they're pagan, or lack thereof, or they burned out of all of the above and they're like, I'm over it, right? A lot of times people come here, usually younger, and they're like, can Buddhism save me? And I'm like, sorry, dude, you're on your own, right? So most important for a newbie who comes from a very heavy religious background is to understand that being lost is totally okay. And there is no like Buddhist God. There is no God in Buddhism. As I alluded to earlier, it doesn't mean like the Buddha wasn't saying God exists or doesn't exist. If Buddha were alive today with the notion and understanding that we have of God, his response to me, I believe, would have been the same. We would have asked him about a different God and then about Jesus, and he would have said, look, if you believe in that, okay. If you don't, you don't. But Buddhism, what's your name? Ashley. Ashley? Buddhism's not going to say, Ashley, don't believe in Catholicism. Don't believe in Christianity. Don't believe in Buddhism will not say that. You on your own will come to a place of whether you believe and follow those teachings or not. It's not Buddhists' place to cross that line. Does that make sense? Someone asked the Dalai, you heard of the Dalai Lama? Someone asked him years ago if this country needs more Buddhists. And he said, the world has enough Buddhists. We don't need more, right? We got enough. This country needs people who are peaceful and happy. So as a newbie, you will stay confused for a while. Partially because you're potentially trying to draw a lot of parallels. And I've done this long enough with people who are brand new. People come from one religion and they want to know, well, we read the Bible, so what do we read in Buddhism? Well, we believe in Jesus, so who do we believe in Buddhism? There aren't parallels there. So as soon as you kind of let go of that trying to draw parallels, it'll also make the approach of how to study Buddhism a little bit easier. Ultimately, what Buddhism wants you to get to know is Ashley. Not about the Buddha, not about the other people who are here, nothing against the people who are here, not about the Dharma Bum Temple or any other Buddhist leader. Buddhist teachings want you to know Ashley. They want you to understand what makes you happy and what makes you sad, what makes you suffer and what makes you feel free from suffering. You'll spend years doing just that. And along the way, of course, there are lots of books you can read and different Buddhist places to go and different Buddhist cultures and traditions that will all have an influence on you. Some may be positive, some may be negative. You'll go to some Buddhist place and be like, man, that's some weird stuff, right? That exists in Buddhism also. So my favorite teaching is the beginner's mind, and it comes from the Zen school, Zen practice of Buddhism. And the beginner's mind is to show up to something as if you've never been there before. For a newbie, that's perfect. But what you don't want to do is bring in all that old baggage of how you tried to do things or see things and take that same lens and drop it onto Buddhism. Be lost for a while. And just try to pay attention to your experience and how you feel as you encounter Buddhist teachings, practice, places, people, right? You'll see lots of people like me in different places in Buddhism telling you stuff. And some of them you'll be like, yeah, that makes sense to me. I can, work with that. And some of them you'll be like, yo, I'm not going there, right? Learn to trust yourself. And for a lot of people that have been raised with certain religious backgrounds, that's kind of a no-no. You have to put all your faith in someone else. And the Buddha's saying like, hey, you're completely different from how you perceive yourself to be anyway. So work with yourself for a while. Does that help?
Yeah.
And literally, if someone asks me that, I've been asked that question for years. I could be asked that question 20 times in a row, and I would answer it completely differently every single time. So, yeah. Other thoughts or questions? Anything else before we close? Last thing I often share around the same question for everybody really is if you, as you explore Buddhism and you go to different places and you listen to different people, if they come at you with this approach, which again, it does happen in Buddhism, of this is the way, or this is the only way, that's when you know you should probably explore a different Buddhist practice. Because there are Buddhist schools that say this is the only way. And the Buddha taught very specifically, there's 84,000 paths to awakening. He wanted us to understand the very fundamental core Four Noble Truths of Buddhism. Life is filled with suffering, dukkha, that we all suffer throughout our lives. Sometimes extreme and sometimes simple. Sometimes it's food we don't like, and sometimes it's through death and loss. Tremendous suffering on various scales. He wanted us to understand that the cause of that is our greed, our anger, and our ignorance. And so we practice compassion and wisdom and generosity as we work towards overcoming the greed, anger, and ignorance. The third noble truth is the good news. There's an ending to this suffering, discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction that we experience throughout our lives. And this is the Eightfold Path. And that's, as far as what to read, you can Google Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path. That's the foundation of all Buddhist teachings. And the Eightfold Path is to work on having correct views and thoughts and speech and action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. And that summed up is what I talked about earlier with our karma. It's our action. So when we become mindful of what we think, what we say, and what we do, we get to know ourselves and how we treat others. And if a Buddhist school is trying to lock you into, because like I said, they're out there that says, this is the Buddhist master you must believe in, and this is the Buddhist script you must read, that's when you're like, red flag. But usually you can feel that within 10 minutes of walking into the place. So, or you're one who's like, yes, I'm all into that. And then you buy in. So, but my suggestion is don't buy in, 84,000 paths. I mean, there's schools of Buddhism that say the Dalai Lama is like evil. So just so you don't all think the Buddhists are all anything special. In fact, I just read this morning, it was a great quote, and I'll close. I'll paraphrase it because I can't remember it word for word, but Suzuki Roshi, Shinra Suzuki, built San Francisco Zen Center. He talked about really exploring Buddhist teachings from people and places that understand the vastness of Buddhist teachings, not the narrow. So that's important. So I'll close on that. We'll join palms. We'll do a transfer of merit. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gain be transferred to the more than 4 million lives that have been lost from the pandemic and their family and friends who continue to suffer to this day. May they all be at peace and free from suffering. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. So a few quick announcements before you all head out. Thanks all for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this temple 15 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners. We do our best to take our unenlightened understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. So thanks for showing up. After 14 years, we closed for 16 months during the pandemic, and we just reopened about 2 months ago. So we've reopened, very limited, partial schedule, partial attendance. So we appreciate you wearing masks and sitting apart and doing all the crazy things, checking in at the door and, us scanning you and taking your social security number and all that stuff. We appreciate you playing along. It allows, people to be here, hopefully feel safe and healthy, and we don't want to pack 80 people in here like we used to. So thank you all for doing that. Nothing out of the ordinary. In person, we're sitting Tuesday nights, Wednesday nights, and Thursday nights, and Saturday morning. And again, even to your question earlier, there are different people who lead each class. We all have different approaches to Buddhism. We all have a different background to Buddhism, and we're all just as screwed up as anybody else. So keep that in mind. Tuesdays, I do the intro class Tuesday nights. Alex does the loving kindness metta class Wednesday, and Travis does the basics Dharma bum and meditation Thursday nights. Recovery, we have a huge recovery sangha, anyone battling addiction, drugs, alcohol, or anything for that matter. Sunday morning, 10 a.m., and Tuesday nights. RSVPs we only require for Saturday morning and the Tuesday night recovery group. So I think we've got it under control now where we're okay with the number of people that are coming in. But we will continue the RSVPs for Saturday morning and the recovery for Tuesday nights. Other than that, thank you all for being here. I'm going to jump out real quick and because I need to open downstairs. So if you have any questions, I'll be down there. Same thing, Buddha for You is closed during the week. We open Saturday, Sunday, 12 to 3 and an hour in the evening. And the temple is also closed all day, unfortunately. We sit 8 and 9 in the morning, or 8 to 9 in the morning, and then we close it during the day until the nighttime. So we're just out of respect for the current condition and caution as much as possible, trying to be safe for those who are here. So thank you for being here. Good luck.
Is it Wednesday at 7 or?
Tuesday, Wednesday, and 7. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights are all at